You see that especially in the states. Some states support it, some states hate it, and where that will go, I don't know. Time will tell.
Just watching the news, for example, you've got what happened in Benghazi. You had what happened in Syria. You've got the ongoing terrorist fights in several different theaters. You've got the push-shove match between President Obama and President Putin. You know, people are saying, what's next? Is this going to be another Cold War? Is there going to be the threat of nuclear annihilation? Doesn't anybody really care? And then look what they're doing to the armed forces. Here you've got men and women who volunteered to protect freedom and democracy. They come back and they're treated with anything but, in my opinion, the respect that they so rightfully deserve and the care and detention that they so rightfully deserve. And I don't see anybody in either of the houses or the White House trying to do anything about it.
Yes, that's a big problem. The VA Medical Center scandals are really becoming a big issue in the news. The Cheyenne, Wyoming one and the Phoenix one, where people there were manipulating the records to make it seem like they were getting treatment within 2 weeks, which is required.
Yeah.
But in fact, they weren't getting treatment at all. I think you will see both parties attack this problem aggressively. I don't know if Shinseki will lose his job as the head of the VA, but it's a real strong possibility. Even if the president doesn't want to see him go, I think public pressure will get to the point where both parties insist that he has to go. Even if he's not the person mostly responsible for this problem, he is the head of the department, so he has to accept some responsibility. This type of situation, though, really isn't that new. Our forces have been neglected at other times in our history.
Yeah, I can just say the Vietnam vets, they were treated like dirt.
That's definitely true. Some say that they often were spat upon.
Yes.
I don't know if that's true. I never saw it. I was quite young then, but I do remember that the country was very divided over the Vietnam War. There was a lot of anger, and unfortunately, the Vietnam vets, they seem to have forgotten, weren't the ones that decided to go over there. They were put there by their government.
That's right. You know, and once again, we didn't learn the lesson. That's true. It seems that no matter what era of history we are in, and I'm talking since 1950, at the end of World War II, there's always been a conflict going on. And, you know, here goes the United States again, being the policeman of the world. And I think that it's come to a point where the people of the U.S. are saying, enough, we're tired, it's exhausting. And yet you've got the leaders in Washington who are saying, well, you know, we should do this, we should do that. And it was funny to see how the ball bounced from one court to the other the last couple of days with the events that are happening in Nigeria with these 200 girls that were kidnapped. At one point, the United States says, well, we don't want to get involved because we don't want this group of terrorists attacking us. And then the people were saying, you know, this is okay. And then all of a sudden, the money is being spent on drones, aerial surveillance, satellite time against the people. It seems that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you're the historian. The concept of we the people has been replaced by I the person.
You may be correct. That's an interesting point. Public virtue back in the 1700s was very different from what it is today. When I was doing research for my book, I found it quite interesting that in the 1700s, everybody, and especially your members of Congress, realized that they had to make sacrifices themselves for the best interest of the nation as a whole. Someone like James Madison really stood out. He was willing to be criticized by his constituents as long as he was doing something in the best interest of the nation as a whole. He was doing his job, and he felt all the members of Congress should do that. Nowadays, you really don't see that. And it's not just in Congress. It's it's in society in general, I think. People are very interested in me, not the nation. And it's too bad because I don't think that was the case not too long ago. Certainly, if you go back to the Kennedy years, the famous line, ask not what your country can do for you,
but what you can do
what
for your
you
country.
can do for your country.
Exactly.
Now we don't hear that or see it in the actions of the people in Congress or elsewhere in the government.
It seems to me that the current administration wants to be best friends with all the Americans. Instead of showing leadership qualities, it's like, I'm your best friend. Would I do this if I wasn't your best friend? This kind of attitude.
Well, I never thought about that. I do think there's a void of leadership right now. I think it's very noticeable.
Yeah, and it seems that people have forgotten the concept. A lot of people love to complain. I'm sure you hear this more than most people. Doing what you do, you've got your bachelor's degree in Russian language. You've worked with the military. A lot of people complain, but not very many people actually want to take any action that can make the change that they want. Like, they forget that they have the ability. And it's called voting. If you don't like something, you've got your congressman, you've got your senator. You can actually complain. You can take positive action. Not all action needs to be done with physical force.
Sure. I agree 100%. And it's not just voting in the big elections, but the primaries. You see very few people turn out for the primaries. It's really quite sad, to be honest with you. People
complain, but they don't want to do anything about it. Like my favorite saying is, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
That's a good saying.
Yeah. And it boggles my mind why people who, they'll complain about local government. Well, why don't you run to become a councilman or a mayor and put the changes that you believe would be for the betterment for the municipality or the town or the county into effect? Well, geez, I don't want to go that far. Well, if you don't want to go that far, then what are you bitching about?
Right, or they could at least do research on the candidates and show up at the polls.
Exactly. But it seems like this is a very, we'll sit back and we'll see what happens. I don't agree with what's happening, but let's do it anyway, because God knows I don't want to get involved. I'll just put my head in the sand, watch the football game, and drink some more beer. David, stand by. You and I have to take our commercial break with the news. Exonation Dave Richards is my special guest, and we'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue talking to David about his book, Swords in Their Hands, George Washington and the Newburgh Conspiracy. His website is swordsintheirhands.com. Are you considering calling a psychic to read your situation? Then consider David Champion, a psychic medium for more than 20 years with thousands of readings under his belt. David Champion will make you feel comfortable. He has proven to be honest and accurate. He's a straight shooter. There's no guesswork. What he sees is what you get. While he is a medium, most of the calls focus on relationships, not only love, but work, school, neighbors, and more. Need help with finding a job and preparing for the interview? Are you dealing with people who are obstacles in your path? For more information, go to davidchampion.com, $1.50 per minute paid by credit card with a minimum of 30 minutes. For your reading with David Champion, call 1-877-702-8598. That's 1-877-702-8598. Now you can dial in to listen to the X-Zone Radio Show from anywhere in the world with Rob McConnell 24/7, 365 by dialing 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080. If you have a mobile phone or landline, the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is now at your beck and call at 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080, 24/7, 365.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Explanation, Dave Richards is my special guest this hour. He's the author of Swords in Their Hands, George Washington and the Newburgh Conspiracy. His website is www.swordsintheirhands.com. Tell me, Dave, what do you think George Washington would do if he were president of the United States today?
I think he'd avoid some of those foreign entanglements. I don't think we'd be involved in international affairs quite to the extent that we are now. I also think he'd try to calm down the members of Congress. Washington placed a great deal of emphasis on checking your passions. In his Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior, he wrote, "In all causes of passion admit reason to govern." He especially feared anger. That was a very strong passion, and it caused people to do dangerous things. Today, of course, we see a lot of angry members of Congress. We sometimes see the president get angry. We see too many politicians get angry, and some of it probably is just an act, but they do need to be a bit calmer. I don't remember this type of situation back in the 80s. I think we had better members of the Senate and House of Representatives. I think they worked together better and had a better sense of what the nation as a whole needed.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that with all the news channels that are out there these days and all the news networks, that the media has a lot to do with how government actually plays out? Do you think that members of the political parties play up to the media and play up to the camera?
Well, I think some do. When you watch TV, you tend to notice the same representatives and senators on TV all the time. I'm very surprised when I see someone I've never heard of. It's, in a way, a pleasant surprise. But I remember for years I thought Patrick Leahy was on TV far too often, senator from Vermont.
Right. In today's political arena, the reopening of the Benghazi event, you've got Secretary of State Kerry being brought before the committee. How do you think George Washington would have handled Benghazi?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think he would have been in favor of getting all the details and finding out what went wrong in order to prevent something like that from happening ever again. I think, too, he would have commanded so much respect that the hearings would have been very focused. I don't think you'd see theatrics of any sort. I think you'd see questions and answers. Today, a lot of times when you see hearings, you end up listening to speeches before you finally get to the questions. And I don't think those types of hearings serve the public very well. Hearings are necessary, but when they're conducted, they really should focus on the events and be a question and answer session, not a session for members to give speeches before TV. So in that regard, I think you're correct. I do think TV alters their behavior quite a bit.
Tell me about your book. What was your inspiration for writing this book?
That's a great question. I was reading an excellent book about the writing of the Constitution, and at one point in the book, the authors emphasized how important George Washington's presence at the Constitution